Let me tell you something that might sting a little. Not everyone is going to clap when you start healing. In fact, some people will resent you for it. Not because you hurt them, not because you change for the worse, but because your growth exposes what they're unwilling to face in themselves. When you begin to set boundaries, when you stop apologizing for existing, when you choose therapy over denial and peace over chaos, you become a mirror. And mirrors are terrifying for people who are comfortable hiding. Your healing disrupts unspoken agreements. The agreement that you would stay small. The agreement that you would keep absorbing their dysfunction. The agreement that you would play the role they assigned you, peacemaker, scapegoat, overachiever, fixer. And when you quietly step out of that role, when you say no more without yelling, without drama, just with grounded clarity, it shakes the room. Some people don't miss the old you. They miss controlling you. They miss benefiting from your unhealed wounds. They miss the version of you that tolerated what you no longer will. And here's the hardest truth: your healing forces other people to confront their stagnation. And not everyone is brave enough to do that. So if you feel tension rising as you rise, don't panic. That tension isn't proof you're doing something wrong. It's proof you're finally doing something right. When you begin to heal, you don't just change internally, you disrupt systems. Families, friendships, workplaces, they all operate on unspoken contracts, invisible rules. Don't rock the boat. Don't talk about that. Keep the peace at any cost. And for a long time, maybe you honored those contracts. You swallowed your feelings. You minimized your pain. You laughed off disrespect. You overfunctioned so others could underfunction. You carried emotional weight that was never yours to hold. But healing makes you conscious. And once you see the pattern, you can't unsee it. So you start saying things like, that doesn't work for me. You start pausing before you automatically say yes. You stop explaining your boundaries like you're pleading for approval. And suddenly, people feel betrayed. Not because you harmed them, but because you stop participating in the dysfunction that made them comfortable. See, when you change, the entire system has to adjust. And if the system refuses to grow, it will try to pull you back into your old role. It may guilt you, shame you, label you as selfish, dramatic, distant. But here's the truth. You are not responsible for maintaining a dynamic that required you to disappear. Growth breaks unspoken contracts. And when those contracts were built on your silence, your healing will sound like rebellion. Let them call it rebellion. You call it freedom. When you start setting boundaries, something powerful happens. You stop abandoning yourself. And that shift, it feels threatening to people who benefited from your self-abandonment. Boundaries are not punishments. They are not weapons. They are not acts of cruelty. They are clarity. They are self-respect in action. But to someone who is unhealed, your boundary doesn't feel like clarity. It feels like rejection. When you say, I'm not available for that conversation, they hear, you don't matter. When you say, I won't tolerate being spoken to that way, they hear you're a bad person. When you say, I need space, they hear I'm leaving you. Because unhealed people often confuse access with love. They believe that if they can reach you anytime, vent anytime, lean on you anytime without accountability, that means connection. And when you change the terms, when you require mutual respect, it destabilizes them. But listen to me carefully. Someone else's discomfort with your boundary does not mean your boundary is wrong. It means they were comfortable crossing it. You are not cruel for choosing peace. You are not selfish for protecting your energy. You are not cold for refusing chaos. The people who truly love you will adjust. They may stumble, they may need time, but they will respect your growth. The ones who only loved your compliance, they will resist. And that resistance is not your responsibility to manage. There is something deeply unsettling about watching someone you know begin to rise. Not because rising is wrong, but because it confronts the question, why am I still standing still? When you stop playing small, when you start speaking up in rooms where you once stayed silent, when you pursue opportunities you once talked yourself out of, when you refuse to dim your intelligence, your talent, Your light, it forces others to confront their own hesitation. And not everyone is ready for that. Your courage highlights their fear. Your discipline highlights their excuses. Your self-respect highlights where they've been settling. And instead of saying, maybe I can grow, to some people will say, you've changed. Yes, you have. But what they often mean is, you're no longer shrinking to make me comfortable. For years, maybe you made yourself digestible, less opinionated, less ambitious, less emotional, less powerful. You told yourself it was humility. You told yourself it was kindness. But sometimes playing small isn't humility, it's self-protection. And when you finally stop protecting others from their own insecurities, when you allow yourself to take up space unapologetically, it disrupts the balance. Some people liked you better when you doubted yourself, when you asked for permission, when you needed their validation. Confidence, especially quiet confidence, can feel threatening to someone who relies on comparison to feel secure. But here's the truth, your growth is not arrogance. It is alignment. And you are allowed to outgrow any space that required you to stay small. When you are unhealed, you tolerate things that slowly break you. You tolerate sarcasm disguised as humor. You tolerate emotional inconsistency. You tolerate crumbs and call it love. You tolerate chaos because it feels familiar. But healing sharpens your awareness. It recalibrates your nervous system. You begin to notice the tension in your body when someone disrespects you. You feel the exhaustion after conversations that once felt normal. You sense manipulation where you once sensed connection. And that awareness changes everything. You no longer argue to be understood by people committed to misunderstanding you. You no longer chase closure from those who thrive on confusion. You no longer stay in rooms that require you to abandon your peace. And when you shift your tolerance, people feel it. The ones who were used to dumping their anger on you will call you distant. The ones who relied on your endless patience will call you cold. The ones who fed off your emotional labor will say you've lost your heart. But what you've actually lost is your appetite for dysfunction. Healing refines your standards. It doesn't make you harsh. It makes you discerning. You stop confusing intensity with intimacy. You stop confusing drama with passion. You stop confusing familiarity with safety. And when you raise the standard for how you are treated, some people won't rise to meet it. They will try to lower you back down. Don't go. Your nervous system deserves peace more than they deserve access. Let's say the quiet part out loud. Some people preferred you wounded, not because they consciously wanted you in pain, but because wounded you was predictable. Wounded you over-explained. Wounded you chased reassurance. Wounded you tolerated mixed signals. Wounded you stayed. Wounded you didn't require accountability. But healed you asks questions. Healed you notices patterns. Healed you walks away the first time disrespect shows up instead of the 15th. And that unpredictability can feel threatening to someone who built comfort around your brokenness. When you heal, you stop reacting from trauma. You stop responding from fear of abandonment. You stop clinging to what hurts just because it's familiar. And suddenly the dynamic shifts. You're calmer. You're clearer. You're not as easy to manipulate. And when someone can no longer trigger you the way they used to when their guilt trips no longer hook into your shame, when their silent treatment no longer sends you spiraling, they feel powerless. But here's the truth. What they're really feeling is the loss of control. You are no longer operating from survival mode. You are operating from self-trust. And self-trust cannot be controlled. It cannot be gaslit. It cannot be intimidated. It cannot be easily swayed by emotional chaos. So if someone seems unsettled by your new steadiness, understand this. They were comfortable with your wounds because your wounds made you manageable. Your healing makes you sovereign. And sovereignty is not something everyone knows how to handle. There was a time when you tried to explain everything. You explained why you were hurt. You explained why their words mattered. You explained why their behavior crossed a line. You begged to be understood. And maybe you thought that if you just found the right combination of words, the right tone, the right moment, they would finally see you. But healing changes the way you communicate. Now, you don't over-explain, you don't chase, you don't perform your pain to prove it's real. You state your boundary once, calmly, clearly, and if it's ignored, you move. And that silence, it unsettles people. Because when you stop arguing, when you stop defending, when you stop engaging in the back and forth drama, they lose access to the emotional intensity they were used to. Your silence is no longer withdrawal, it's discernment. You're not quiet because you're defeated. You're quiet because you're done negotiating your worth. And that kind of silence feels loud to someone who depended on your reactions. When you don't react, they can't control the narrative. When you don't respond to provocation, they have to sit with their own behavior. That's uncomfortable. So they may try harder to provoke you. They may accuse you of being distant, detached, uncaring. But what you've actually become is regulated. You don't need the last word anymore. You don't need to win the argument. You don't need them to validate what you already know. Your peace is proof of your growth, and your silence now carries more power than your pain ever did. For years, maybe you lived inside a story they wrote about you. You're too sensitive. You're dramatic. You always overreact. You can't handle the truth. And slowly, without realizing it, you started editing yourself to fit their narrative. You questioned your instincts. You second guessed your emotions. You shrank your reactions so you wouldn't be labeled too much. But healing rewrites the script. You start asking, what if I'm not too sensitive? What if I'm perceptive? What if I'm not dramatic? What if I'm responding to real pain? What if my reactions make sense in the context of what I've endured? And the moment you step out of their story, the moment you stop defending yourself against accusations that were never yours to carry, you become uncontrollable because you're no longer arguing for a role in their narrative. You're authoring your own. That is threatening. When you refuse to accept the distorted version of yourself that kept them comfortable, when you calmly say, that's not who I am, and you mean it, they lose the leverage of shame. And shame is powerful currency in dysfunctional dynamics. But healed you doesn't trade in shame anymore. You don't need to prove you're good. You don't need to fight to be seen. You don't need to convince anyone of your reality. You know who you are. And when you stop participating in a story that diminishes you, the people who benefited from that version of you will resist. Let them. Because you were never meant to live as a supporting character in someone else's insecurity. Here's the thing about growth. It's contagious, but it can feel like a threat. When you step into your healing, when you finally value your own time, your own energy, your own voice, you become a mirror. And mirrors are brutal because they don't lie. They reflect what others refuse to see in themselves. Your courage forces reflection. Your clarity forces accountability. Your boundaries force choice. Some people don't want to see the truth. They don't want to face the parts of themselves that have been stagnant, angry, or fearful. And when they look into the mirror of your growth, it triggers discomfort, sometimes rage, sometimes subtle undermining, sometimes cold distance. They might say things like, you've changed, or I don't know who you are anymore, or even you're too sensitive now. Translation, you've exposed my fear, my denial, my excuses. And here's the lesson. Their reaction is not a reflection of your growth. It's a reflection of their resistance. When your evolution rattles others, it doesn't mean you are doing something wrong. It means you are stepping into a frequency they can't yet handle. You can soften, you can explain, you can be patient. But never shrink. Never mute your light to make someone else comfortable. Growth isn't about their comfort. Growth is about your truth. And when you live your truth unapologetically, you become untouchable, not because you are perfect, but because you are whole. Your healing is a gift to yourself first, and to those willing to witness it authentically. This is the final truth. Your healing is not negotiable. Your growth is not a problem to be fixed by anyone else. You are allowed, no, you are obligated to protect your peace, honor your boundaries, and step fully into the life you've been avoiding out of fear, guilt, or obligation. Some people will hate it, Some people will try to gaslight you, manipulate you, or pull you back into old dynamics. Some will whisper, "You've changed," as if that were a crime. Let them. That discomfort is not yours to carry. It's the mirror reflecting the refusal to evolve. You do not owe them your old version. You do not owe them explanations, apologies, or compromises that diminish you. You do not need anyone's permission to rise. Every step you take toward wholeness, clarity, and courage is sacred. Every boundary you uphold is an act of love for yourself. Every choice to walk away from toxicity is a declaration: I am not small. I am not disposable. I am not afraid to be whole. So when the world pushes back, when voices rise in judgment or resentment, remember, this is the cost of your freedom. This is the price of your peace, and you are more than willing to pay it. Stand in your truth. Embrace your growth. Let your healing be fierce, unapologetic, and illuminating. You are not responsible for their comfort, their jealousy, or their fear. You are responsible for your life. And in claiming it fully, you show the world what is possible when someone refuses to shrink. You are healing. You are rising, and no one can take that away from you.